Hey, White Sox fans, you just heard the very thrilling ending of the World Baseball Classic. Shohei Ohtani comes in for the save, pitches the last inning, matchup against teammate Mike Trout. Apparently the first time they've ever faced each other. I have to think that somebody chucked a ball, one of them chucked a ball at each other over all these different years playing together. Starts him out with his crazy ass breaking stuff, then hits him with four straight pieces of blistering heat, including a sort of a waste. I think came close to 102 miles an hour, and then K's Trout on what they're calling a sweeper that basically covered the whole plate. And I'm sorry, Mike Trout at 87 miles an hour, even Mike Trout had no chance. Team Japan with the 3-2 victory, reclaiming the World Baseball Classic title. We are dedicating, this is post-game podcast number 16. This is the first of the 16 we're devoting to sort of not the White Sox. And, why not? It's we've all got caught more and more up in the World Baseball Classic to the point where we've had consistent coverage from Christina Erdo on site. And we've been doing a couple of podcasts, at least semi devoted to it. This is the first one that's going to talk not about necessarily being at the World Baseball Classic, but watching it, the different rooting interests. Hint, hint, if you're watching, we see definite affiliation from Dante Jones. And I would say very fairly repping Team Mexico. It's Adrian Serrano. I'm Brett Ballantini. I suppose I will take the U.S. by default, whatever. But first of all, just impressions from both of you, the tournament, where you started with it in terms of your interest, how it built or fizzled if it did as it went on, and how this built up toward really a couple terrific games to wind all of this up.
I mean, coming in, I'm not a huge supporter of spring training in general. So, like, any reason to root for real baseball, like early on, I'm into it. And it's just like anybody that watched any of these games, it's very clear very early on how much it means to the players. I think there's something I retweeted earlier. It's like the worst thing you can say about the WBC is that like the games were so exciting that a guy got hurt celebrating a huge win. Like, like
Yeah.
that's that's how much it means. I think we had Randy Rosarena on record saying that that catch that he made in the quarterfinals was bigger than any of the home runs he hit in the World Series. Like, so it's hard not to watch any of these games and just kind of get pulled into it. I knew I was going to be interested. I didn't think I was going to become like a meatball pulling for my team by the end of it, but that's where we got to. And that's the magic of baseball. And when they're enjoying it that much on the field, like, it's hard not to enjoy it that much as the spectator.
Well, I am not going to do any disparaging, but speaking of meatballs cheering for their teams, the man has got himself a Team Japan jersey. I'm loving it. Dante, same question. I mean, how did your, biorhythms change? Obviously, a team you were pulling for took it all in really a thrilling fashion, but this had to be a lot of fun for you to watch as well.
Oh yeah, I feel like this. I was on vacation all of last week, so I chose the absolute perfect time to like be on vacation, not even knowing it like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So, as a person that I love Team Japan. The Mexico team really like those blue and purple. I mean, those blue and pink jerseys, just beautiful. Like stylistically, there's a lot of great style, except from America because America. But
What do we
great
need for
game.
style?
I'm happy. I'm happy that Japan won. I would have been fine if America won because Lance Lynn and Tim Anderson get trophies then,
Mhm.
and I guess Kendall Graveman too. So that would have been nice. But this
Sort of.
works. I love like this is why when people say doesn't matter, yes, it matters to the players, and that's who should matter to the most.
Mhm.
So as Adrian said, I don't like spring training. There's a reason why no one's seen my writing about spring training because I don't have it in me to watch spring training games typically. But this, oh, sign me up every year. I will miss into 2026.
When we've had the naysayers and all that, and people are figuring out, okay, is this the best way to is this the best way to do it? When should it be done? And there's been discussion about like, okay, maybe like hockey breaks for a month in the Olympics, and maybe that's when it should be done. Um, but this sort of breaks into the season as well. It's spring training, but technically the season has begun. This actually does, as you two have both pointed out, it sort of breaks up what is a really, it is the it's an exciting time because baseball's coming back, but it's sort of the most mundane, and it is a drag. I mean, 6 weeks of it is a drag. This punches it up in a way. And at this point now, okay, it's over and it's basically a week now, so we're into the season. Okay, we can deal with that. It's sort of like already breaking up the season in a way that's not too disruptive. And I think it sort of helps build excitement for the major leagues to get started by seeing this. And I would probably say that if like it probably if none of our teams were so closely involved in the title chase, I think we'd still be caught up to some degree, just because this is fun baseball to watch. You've got packed houses and all of that. So the timing of it seems like it may already be pretty appropriate. Does it feel right to you, or is there a better time you think that this could be played?
I mean, I think the argument could be made possibly for, you know, depending if it's going to be end up being in warm weather cities, which it seems to be anyway, most of these games, that, you could make an argument for it. Like, not necessarily you don't want to compete with the MLB playoffs, but like because this is such a big thing, like kind of something that would curtail more with the towards the end of the season. And then if these injuries, if that's the concern, these injuries that might pop up, like you have a whole off season to kind of get back into shape before the season. I think the next one has been already agreed to for 3 years from now, and I think 3 years is a good amount of time in between them. I mean, I'm selfish and I want them, every year, like Dante, but I think 3 years, knowing that a lot of these guys are under contract for other, things, and I don't foresee any kind of thing happening like with the World Cup where that's written into the bylaws that like it doesn't matter if you have a contract, if your country calls for you, you go.
Mhm.
I can't see that happening, but I think at least like maybe the MLB teams would be a little more lenient to let more guys in if it wasn't like right before the season starts, because it just starts you off in a deficit if something were to happen. And then maybe you wouldn't get the best of the best because some of them would still be making a postseason run, but maybe they wouldn't be as missing it out. As a player, you wouldn't miss it as much if you were playing for something else. So maybe you start the early part, the earlier rounds, as the postseason is drying up, and then finish it and do what the NFL does and try to own as much of the year as possible. I don't see why that's not baseball's model. Like, why be happy just with the summer? Like, keep pushing. The baseball is played year round everywhere else in the world, so like, why isn't it here?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
that's kind
brought
of
it.
how it feels like. Oh,
Go ahead,
yeah,
Dante.
that's kind of how it feels like. We should get yearly baseball. Like I've been watching so much more baseball outside MLB over the last like couple years, thanks to the whole lockdown and all that, trying to find games in Taiwan and things like that, like KBO games,
Mhm.
all sorts of stuff. And one thing I've really noticed is, like, again, this is fun. Everybody loves it. Woo. One, two, and more importantly, apparently Rob Manfred has said that he wants more star level pitching in these games. Like he wants more MLB stars to
Mhm.
go to the country and represent them. And I think that's a really good sign for the future of this tournament. And there's gonna always be a few people that think it's useless and think all this and all that. But at the end of the day, who cares? We all have fun. If they don't want to have fun with the rest of us, sounds good to them. Not me.
Yeah, the only option I think in terms of moving it, in terms of the timing, would be postseason, and it would limit. You really can't let these guys have time off and then ramp up again. So you probably are going to cut the league in half, and it really is going to be non-playoff teams. I'm not even sure how you necessarily. I guess you pick like 60 guys, and the guys who are in the playoff. Okay, they're not on the team, and the guys on the White Sox get to play because they're not in the postseason. And then you're just ramping right into it. We brought it up last podcast where, you know, the two Chicago teams, because they were basically never in the World Series, would play the City Series every year from about 1900 to pretty much World War II. And that was like a legit, for real money, oftentimes money superseding the World Series money. In fact, that caused a little trouble on the north side of town because the team was accused of lying low in order to play the City Series and not the World Series. But I mean, that was legit. They ran right into it after the season. You know, no reason to have a layoff where then maybe injury can come up. So if you are going to move it from this ramp up time, it really has to be sort of the fade out of the season time. And, you know, you cast a wide enough net for players from the majors, and that goes, you know, obviously not just for Team USA, but for any player in the major leagues representing their country. You cast a wide enough net, you're going to get guys, and it's not necessarily going to be the worst players, because of course there are, as we well know, there are good players on 500 or worse teams. Hopefully not this year, though. Let's take a quick break. We actually do have breaks now. We are representing the mighty and powerful Fans First Sports Network. They have a message to share with you. I'm not sure what it is. This is all new to me. This is actually our first podcast with our actual logo. Shout out Team USA second baseman TA. So this is the first time we've put it all together, and Adrian Serrano and Dante Jones are lucky enough to be sharing in that with me. We're going to take a minute break, come back, talk more WBC and, you know, whatever else. We got to get to talk about Mexico and Japan a little bit. So we'll do that in about 1 minute. White Sox fans and World Baseball Classic fans, we are here on the Sox Populi. I know I'm going to just start calling it Sox Pop at some point. It's just I didn't take Latin. You know, I barely took Spanish. Oh, that's not true. I'm nearly fluent. Just ask Carlos Gomez and all the guys. Diane Viciedo. Oh, we actually did interviews together. Diane, shout out wherever you're playing. Are you playing still in Korea, Japan, wherever you are? Shout out to you. You were my buddy and trying to help me learn and practice my Spanish in the locker room, and vice versa. English coming right back at me. Awesome. Okay. My personal diary aside, let's get back to the World Baseball Classic, where we saw Japan win a thriller against Team USA. I'm not sure. I guess you could say it was in doubt because it was a close game throughout. That scrappy Japan team. You want to talk about grinder ball? These guys just chisel you down. Now, the pitching certainly helps, just like grinder ball, by the way. And by the way, grinder ball came with a lot of big hits. I remember, certainly as a much younger fan, I don't know if this rep still sticks with Japan. I don't think it does, because Hideki Matsui, Ichiro could have hit whatever 50 homers a year. Certainly Shohei Ohtani, power is in Japan, but back in the old days, it was like, well, that is not a very good league because these guys, their home runs are all cheap. They can't hit. Well, who hit the home runs tonight and who has continued to put out incredible offensive output in addition to doing the little things, stolen bases, annoying the subpar USA bullpen, whatever. Let's talk a little bit about the championship game, what you guys saw in it. Obviously, Dante close to it, repping the jersey, but Adrian as well, knowing that Mexico was that close. I mean, literally that close, maybe truly in all of our hearts, maybe the second place team of this tournament, just how that game went and how you felt watching it.
You go ahead, Dante.
All right. So the way I felt was, it was just great to see. Like, Mike Trout was in an important baseball game tonight. Shohei Ohtani was in an important baseball game tonight. They've been in less important baseball games than Tim Anderson. They've been in less important baseball games than Kyle Schwarber, who were both in tonight's game. Team Japan has so many dudes, and we're gonna soon get the can't wait for this guy to come to America thing that people love to do. But as you were saying earlier, like people saying the leagues aren't as good over there, aren't as good here and there, whatever. Well, they just won the World Baseball Classic again, so seems like it's pretty good. They just beat the all-powerful Team USA, who, as Brett said, that was a bull. Like, if I was running that bullpen, I would have just put all starters and like 3 of the best American relievers in the game, I guess, or something other than this. Again, Kendall Graveman. You're on the White Sox. I'm supposed to support you, but my God, why is Kendall Graveman on this team over other dudes that could have been on this team? Speaking of White Sox, like, Jose Ruiz was in the World Baseball Classic.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot
Yeah.
of dudes that I doubt, besides Schwarber, I doubt most of these dudes will be playing important baseball in October.
I think that's the biggest
So
takeaway too. Like why this tournament in particular is so special is just that it's not like we all know that Shohei Ohtani is very good at baseball. You know, like this isn't going to prove or disprove that in any way. But to watch the guys that where you don't know, like Jose Ruiz stand up, like once he's got his country on his chest, they become different players. They're taking on a different role. To watch Patrick Sandoval start that game yesterday versus Japan and just take his country on his back and like pitch beyond anything his career, would have showed you otherwise. It's just different. They've never gotten a chance to play at this level. Like they've never gotten a chance to play in games that mean this much to this many people. Like this might be tonight's game they're talking about might be the most watched baseball game of all time, like televised. That's a thing. Like the World Series is the most important, quote unquote, to the Western view and the baseball view in the numbers of this is the biggest league and the most talent congregated in one place. But like none of those World Series games will put up the numbers of eyeballs that were on this game tonight. So like to watch kids like Roki Sasaki last night against Mexico, and some of the other kids that are 21, 22 from Japan that probably will be coming over here in the next 3 to 4 years. Like I think those are the ones that really make this a special tournament.
Yeah, we have no choice but to acknowledge that there may be, like it's not ever going to replace the World Series, but there's a new World Series, and this is it. And if you listen to the players, they're not going to say this is more necessarily important than the World Series, but the fact that you could talk about it in the same breath, in the same sentence, is significant. You get a guy like Masataka Yoshida, the big posted player coming over this year, heavily criticized contract. He's sort of a small guy, heavily criticized contract for Boston. And what did he do? He out-hit Shohei in this tournament. Again, small sample size, but okay, these guys are having the opportunity to open eyes, and that goes for Team Mexico, Puerto Rico. It's not just the stars, it's not just Javi Baez doing his swim slide, or a big pitcher for or the Yu Darvishes for Team Japan. It's these guys that we're just getting to know, or who are maybe even just making a name for themselves. I mean, it seems like Arozarena for is like he like every few years is like the best player in the world. And maybe that's a good seg to just talk about watching Team Mexico, Adrian, and how you felt seeing that, and a team that really just came within a whisker of potentially taking it all.
Yeah, I think we saw two camps, and they were probably the four best teams in the whole tournament, and Show played like it for most of it. Which we had the two mainly offensive teams in Team USA and Team Venezuela that ended up 9-7, I think, their matchup to get there. And then coming in was Japan, and Mexico probably had the best overall talent at a starting rotation and bullpen level. So you saw these two kind of guys have to cross over each other to get there. And it was just, I think Mexico came in as something like plus 2,000, like they're so to win this tournament. So like nobody expected them to barely get out of the first rounds, let alone be within 3 outs of the actual final. So just to watch that team kind of rally around Rosarena in general, and watch him become a star, and Isaac Paredes become a star. And like I said, I mentioned Patrick Sandoval earlier, like had a great year, coming off a pretty good year for the Angels. And we made a lot about Shohei and Trout today, but Patrick Sandoval struck out both Ohtani and Trout in this tournament, and made sure to let them know about it.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, it's just exciting, and I hope, like, if nothing else, like this run for Mexico is like inspiring to the next generation of young kids in Mexico, and Mexican Americans to like play baseball again. And like they just, when you don't see people that look like you and wear your team's colors, like it's hard to say that that's sports for me. And I think a lot of baseball on the MLB side has done a poor job in spreading to the other countries, because it's kind of all of this like inclusive club of like US baseball, and like baseball is the same everywhere. Like I think that's what we're learning. Like, you know, they love it just as much everywhere else. So it's like got to get out of this mindset of like you might be the biggest and you know most established league, but that doesn't mean you own love for baseball. So I think as you just let that next generation, you know, see people enjoying it as much as we see these guys enjoying the WBC, I think it just starts that next generation of ball players that's going to, you know, try to get to the point that they saw when they were a kid on TV.
Yeah, it's been some time since Mexico, I guess, has been as resonant a voice in the baseball world as has been. Of course, we all know Fernando Valenzuela. White Sox have history there in employing or finding Jorge Horta. And that it was in part due to the fact that Minoso just never stopped playing. He ended up going to the Mexican League and player managing for a number of years. I think he played a role in sort of like pointing the White Sox toward a couple of players. But, you know, it's been sort of a quiet voice for as much talent as there. We do not list them, and they do not show up in Mexico does not show up in drafts and so forth. And you're right. The one way to change that and start reversing the course, Adrian, is tournaments like this where it's like, hey, wait, I see my people. I see somebody like me doing this, and you know, who knows what I mean, we don't know. We won't know for maybe a decade or more the trickle down effect of this, but it has to be positive for baseball in Mexico, and has to be positive for Mexicans and Mexican Americans having more of a footprint in the major leagues. It's just becoming more, you know, more and more international. Dante, you know, from the Japan perspective, but just from this whole tournament perspective, heck, even Italy, probably the only longer shot than Mexico, maybe heading into at least the whatever the round of 16 it was. And of course, you know, we're not under any illusions about, you know, what Italian, they just hired all the mercenaries anyway for their little short run into this tournament. But I mean, the fact that you got a number of different countries, and not always the ones you expect, playing such a significant role in this, and really playing on a pretty equal level. Puerto Rico, Cuba, you know, rallied for sure. USA, Japan, Mexico. You know, you got a number of teams. Really, any of them could have won this thing. That's significant. That's only really a good thing, Dante, in terms of what, you know, the future holds for this as an international sport, right?
So when you guys were talking about like how like it can inspire kids in Mexico, I was just thinking, man, it would be amazing to have something like this and include teams from Africa. Like maybe, you know, you should start growing the footprint of
Mm-hmm.
baseball in different African countries. I was talking about it with a few people, and we were talking about how like it would be dope to have like South Africa and Ethiopia or something like. There's people that would love to play baseball there. You just
Mm-hmm.
MLB has not, because MLB is the biggest name and biggest show in town. MLB has decided markedly over the years to not focus on
Mm-hmm.
people across the African diaspora, whether in America or in Africa itself, unless they happen to
Yeah,
be from the Dominican, Venezuela, or
sure.
Cuba, where they feel like they could take advantage of younger athletes to get them to sign deals that are nowhere near the worth that they're actually playing for. So it's things like that that make you think, wow, like this can expose baseball to a lot of people. And I was thinking about the Team Mexico thing. I was talking to an online friend, as I call him, cool dude named Alex, Alexis, and he's been just like watching this with his grandfather and stuff like that, and it's like being able to watch Mexico make this run in the tournament that no one expected them to. It's a beautiful thing. Like I'm almost tearing up thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's so dope, and we can do like we as a sport can do so much better. But things like this show me that there is a path to being better at least.
And let's shout out the White Sox. I mean, they are one of the leaders. I think it's pretty well known. In fact, they were just honored by Major League Baseball this last offseason for the efforts they made with RBI, and that's been a program that, you know, they instituted, that they've really pushed, and they've gotten scores of players to college and into the major leagues, and certainly into the draft, through their efforts. And you're right, Dante. It's a matter of choices. The NBA, basketball doesn't seem to have a problem with that outreach. Soccer certainly doesn't seem to have a problem with that sort of outreach into Africa. You want to talk about opportunity for an
even
enormous,
the
enormous.
NFL, the NFL has programs to reach out to Africa, and it's like we could be doing the exact same thing, but we choose not to across baseball. And like, there's been a video of a Ugandan catcher that's been circulating for the last month or so. I believe Kyle Farnsworth is like pushing it real hard, trying to get him signed. It's like a 16-year-old in Uganda that like barely has any equipment even, but he saw baseball one day and was like, I want to do that.
Yeah, I think
Trust
that
me, there's more than one kid in Uganda that's saying, I would love to play baseball.
Yeah, and I think that comes back
Yeah,
to
he's
what
a
I was saying
catcher.
about the just the MLB in general and baseball as a an organization in the US, like being so insular and being so against change and being so against branching out. Like they want to keep it the same as it always is. They want to always keep looking backwards at where they came from. And like it's fine to keep looking backwards and appreciate the history, but like to not let the game grow and not have the best people possible finding the game and playing it, I think is a disservice to both the game and the people watching it. And just you should be going to find everybody, like there's no reason to limit to the shores of one country, like when there's players that could play on the highest level. Possibly the best player, we saw the whole tournament ends on a strikeout from possibly the best players, and one of them wasn't born in this country. So it's like that's all you need to know. Like they're out there, that the next guy that's the best player you've ever seen is somewhere possibly in a country that we wouldn't have expected them to come from.
And as farcical as it seems that the major leagues, that MLB based completely at this point, right? Oh yeah, well, other than Trump, sorry, Blue Jays fans, in the United States, could ever be a secondary league. And of course, in our lifetimes, that is unlikely to happen. But the idea that if a league that is close enough in competition, I imagine the only one that really jumps out at this point is Japan, but it's not even inconceivable that the Serie Nationale could also be that, did start tapping into what is just an enormous resource. We'll say in Africa, but there's more than just Africa as well. It doesn't mean that the gap couldn't be closed. The MLB ignores black players in its own country, much less throughout the world, at its own peril. And if you want to see Team USA maybe never winning this again, or certainly the competition level of, say, MPB getting a lot closer to MLB in the US, keep sort of ignoring, at their peril. Just keep that up, because the progress doesn't stop; it marches on, and you got to get on the train. So come on.
Yeah, because you can always fall back on the argument that like, well, the best of the U.S. players don't necessarily play in this tournament, but like as it continues to go like this and you see the other countries really care about it more, I think it lights a fire under some of those US guys to say like, all right, like I need to, represent my country. I need to, play in this type of tournament. I need to be seen on this type of stage. And that in itself is already growing the game, because it's creating more motivation for these players that maybe have already kind of felt like, all right, I made the pros, I don't need to push anymore. It's like there's always more to push for, and grow the game just by existing.
Dante, did you have
yeah. So like, for example, like we said, some of the best players in the world, maybe not all Americans want to play, and all the American players. Mike Trout and Mookie Betts won this entire tournament. Two of the best players in American baseball were in this tournament. Like Tim Anderson, considers his top 10 shortstop in baseball in the tournament. Like the only thing that Team USA couldn't bring to the tournament that other countries could is stellar pitching. Like Lance Lynn is America's ace. So, Lance Lynn, great pitcher. He's probably gonna be the number 3 on the White Sox. That's an issue for America if they want to win this. So as you guys said, progress never stops. So maybe we should start progressing to, maybe next time we'll have Aaron Nola or David DeGrom or the equivalents playing in 3 years. now that I'm saying that, Dylan Cease, who does he play for? Team USA or Team Israel? That's the question we'll be seeing in 3 years, maybe.
It could be. And let's face it, we were joking about this, I think, a couple podcasts ago. I mean, this is the baseball Olympics. I mean, baseball's not, it's on, it's off of an Olympic sport. I don't know that it's had the same sort of effect when it's been an Olympic sport. This is baseball's Olympics. For us as fans of baseball, this really should be the world event that captures our attention. And I think this tournament has done a lot toward that. So I think, you got a few, it's not like it isn't, 6 months from now. It's not like the next year's team is already picked. There's time to ramp up to this and say, okay, maybe we are going to actually throw a little bit more attention to this. It's a tribute to the U.S. that with a pitching staff that was, perhaps not measuring up, no offense, Lance, they came within a run and, maybe a few strikes of winning this whole thing. But hey, this isn't exactly a USA men's basketball here where it's just like, we can run backwards and
This isn't
play our
Carmelo
socks and
Anthony
win.
as Captain America basketball. So it's a bit different, a little bit different than, like you said, in soccer where we get routed.
Yeah, we can, because we can make an argument that like some of these best, the pitchers maybe didn't opt into the thing, but like the U.S. also comes from a huge advantage of having many more pitchers to choose from. Like they can't get down to the fourth and fifth level and get a Lance Lynn. Like they need to pick from the best of the best just because it's a smaller pool of talent. So. But I think it just overall, I don't know how anybody could have watched this tournament and come away thinking anything else but like baseball is the best, and I want the next tournament to start tomorrow, rather than watch the White Sox.
Yeah. Oh, plenty of podcasts to address that, Adrian. So I'll bleep that out. And that's just it. The naysayers, because we heard them and they're probably still even, sending some dumb tweet out. But I would like to think that after these last 2-3 games, that some of those people who might have been knee jerking, in terms of their reactions, might even pull that back, because I don't think you can watch what we watched and deny the excitement. Now, you may quibble with the timing, or I don't know what you quibble with at this point, but quibbling with the competition and the excitement, that's just a foolhardy move. And you are really going to expose your ass if you decide to, tweet, oh, this is stupid, I don't know why we're doing it. I mean, it's in spring training. Yes, there are a couple injuries. Those injuries could very easily have happened in spring training games. And there's so much more pride and interest than a game pitting the Diamondbacks against the Giants or the White Sox against anybody. So, God bless this WBC, because I came in like, okay, whatever. I'll be honest. I was like, yeah, so what, and this data, so what, reaction. We're doing a post-game podcast about it, because this was super cool. And had the games not even been that great and close, if they were all blowouts, it still would have been interesting to discuss and speculate on the future of a tournament that pits this many great players who are all like beating their chests and incredibly proud to be there and competing at a high level. And I'm sure the guys that didn't do it so well, Luis Robert, not feeling so good. Yohan, I think, feeling pretty good going into White Sox camp. Luis, like, oh man, I didn't really show up the way I needed to. And, I hope he doesn't drag into the season, but hey, listen, the guys who stepped up, you can see them maybe really launching into the season. Watch out. I don't want to play Tampa early. I do not want to play Tampa early. And I think we do. So, darn it, Team Mexico. What are you doing?
Yeah, the next 3 years is Luis Robert and Yohan Moncada trying to convince Rosarena to play for Cuba next time.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, really.
I was gonna say, I mean, it's Tampa. They was gonna probably beat us anyway, so it's whatever.
Yeah, okay, that's true. Fair enough. Well, I promise, for those of you who are somehow listening to this but are like, hey man, when are you gonna start talking about the White Sox? Well, all right, sorry, we sort of did skip over it. We name checked all the White Sox, and not always with derision. But we will really have no choice but to back into talking about the White Sox, coming up soon. I'm not sure if the next Sox Populi Sox Pop podcast is going to be like pre-game opening day. I don't know what we've got slated before that, but certainly we will have a ton of content like we did last year, more than last year with the new FSSN network. And Adrian Serrano will be joining me for plenty of those. Dante Jones as well. Of course, till they kick me off, I'll be hosting this thing and forced to talk about the White Sox, whether
I have plenty
I
of
like it or
opinions,
not.
Mary.
Yes, and we all do. And hopefully we can spin them good because, hey, listen, spring training's not been so bad. I don't know what it means, but we could be feeling worse. So who knows? Maybe we can just roll a little bit of optimism into the season. And hey, anything more than better than 500, I guess we got to be sort of happy with. I mean, last year pretty much depanced us all in terms of having any arrogance and any chip about what this window of contention should be. But hey, you know what? That is future Sox Populi podcast. I will learn to speak Latin at some point, and I will come right back at you, host another thing, hopefully with Adrian and Dante with me real soon. At the very least, we'll have a pregame opening day podcast coming up in just about a week. We'll see what else we can squeeze in between now and then. Thanks, everybody, for listening.